Here are 10 more easy tricks for intermediate skateboarders. First up, we have the no comply frontside shove it. This is a fun trick where you step off with your front foot, kick the board to do a frontside shove it with your back foot, and land back on the board. This is a pretty easy trick, especially if you've learned the frontside 180 no comply from my previous video. It's just a matter of setting your feet up in the right position so your front foot can easily slide off the side, and also placing your back foot properly for the frontside shove it. You want to make sure that your back foot isn't too far onto the tail, or you're going to end up flipping the board over or popping it too hard. So just put your foot in that little pocket where you can still scoop the board but not pop the nose up too high. Besides that, this trick is pretty self-explanatory. As you're rolling, let your front foot slide off and go straight to the ground, and then push down and forward with your back foot. Just remember that for this trick, you don't really want to pop the tail too hard, just be kind of lazy about it. And push just enough to get the board to turn 180. If you push the tail too hard, the board tends to flip over or fly up and hit you in the face. So just try and keep it nice and lazy on this one. You can practice this trick by just leaving your front foot on the ground and practicing the scooping motion with your back foot. Once you get that down, you can practice while standing on the board with both feet. And finally, if you're comfortable with that, you can put them together and try it while you're rolling. Trick number 2 is the old school kickflip. This trick has a really weird stance, but it's really fun to do. It's a really easy concept. Your toes hook under the side of the board, and then as you jump, your toes come up and flip the board over. The hardest part about this trick is getting comfortable in that stance while rolling. So you may just want to practice putting your feet in this position at first and getting comfortable standing. Another thing to practice is flipping the board over from underneath with the toes of your back foot. You can do this by just standing to the side of your board and putting your toes underneath and lifting your foot up. And once you're comfortable with that, you can actually get into the foot positioning for this trick and try it while standing still. The hardest part about this trick is making sure you actually hook your toes under enough to get the board to flip over. You'll know you're not hooking it enough if the board doesn't flip over completely, or if you're just completely missing the flip. Once you do have the stance and hooking your foot properly down, then all it takes is jumping, slightly turning your body 90, and going with the board. Next up, we have the Fakie Bigspin. For this trick, you roll fakie, and you shove the board to do a 360 while your body does a 180 in the same direction. It may seem a little hard, but if you have fakie shove-its, and if you can do a fakie backside pivot, you're essentially just putting those two together with a little extra shove in there. Because you're riding fakie, you'll have momentum on your side, so it's actually easier than you think to get the full 360 shove it. You can practice this trick by landing with just one foot at first, and getting a feel for the shove and the rotation motions, and then when you feel confident enough, you can just jump with it and try and land on the board. It's important to think of this trick as one fluid motion instead of a 360 shove it and a body varial. You can see how I start to rotate, and the board doesn't even leave my feet until about 90 degrees. Mainly just try and keep the board underneath you. If you play around with this one enough, you'll see it's actually pretty easy because of the momentum. Trick number 4 is the one-footed manual. This is one of those tricks where some people just get it and some people don't. I would say the most important part of this trick is the stance that you do them in. If you watch my one-footed manuals, I'm actually technically doing them switch. And that's just because I found that I'm more comfortable balancing on my left foot than I am with my right foot. So you can test out which one you're more comfortable with, but whichever foot you use, you want to make sure that the positioning when doing this trick is that it's kind of halfway on the tail and halfway on the board, but your toes are facing forward. Basically, just pretend you're wearing Heelys for this one. You can kind of feel out the sweet spot for this trick by standing still and trying it, or even holding onto something and trying it, but I think it's actually easier when you're moving. This one may seem difficult, but I promise it's all about the foot positioning and making sure that you have proper balance between your heel and your toes. Next up, we have another no comply trick with the no comply impossible. This is a really cool trick to bust out real quick when you're cruising, and that wrap around your back foot just feels really awesome. Like with most no comply tricks, you're going to want to have your front foot in a position where it's easily going to be able to slide off the side of the board. And for your back foot, you're going to want to have your toes hanging off the toe side pocket. A few of the practice steps for this one are in my How to Impossible video. So if you just want to go all out and learn that, then I'll put a card with a link to that one. But otherwise, I'll sum up the important ones here. Basically, you just want to get really used to that feeling of the board scooping and wrapping around your back foot. The easiest way to do this is to practice while standing still with your front foot on the ground. You basically just want to get used to doing this motion. You pop down on the tail pretty hard, and you scoop your foot around to follow it and make the board do a backflip around your foot, essentially. After getting used to this motion, you can start practicing by starting with both of your feet on the board. And take note that the pressure that kind of builds up between your front foot getting ready to slide off the edge of the board and your back foot being in that pocket is what's going to help you get the rotation when your front foot finally does slide off the board and you pop and scoop the board around real fast. Also, I found that the closer I put my front foot up to the bolts, the more stable I am with this trick, and it tends to stay under me better. Just like with the no comply frontside shove it, you don't want to try too hard with this trick or else it'll fly away from you. For the next trick, we have the boneless fingerflip. So first off, it's important to note that there's a difference between a boneless fingerflip where you just flip the board and let it land on the ground, and then this type where you flip the board, catch it, and then jump back on it. I don't know if there's different names for these, but for the sake of this video, I'm talking about the one where you flip it, catch it with your hand again, and jump back on. So if you've watched my previous intermediate and easy tricks, then you should be able to do a regular boneless and maybe a 180 boneless. So this trick is the same concept, except you're adding a little flip and catch in the middle. Skill-wise, this trick is not too hard. The hardest part is trying to make it look good. It's hard to put all the steps together into one fluid motion, but if you break them down and practice each one, then it's not too hard. First off, just make sure you can do a regular boneless first. Next, you want to get really comfortable flipping your board and catching it. The faster you can flip it and catch it, then the smoother this trick will look. So just practice doing this over and over again. You can practice jumping and landing on your board to get comfortable with that. Then you can practice flipping the board and jumping and landing on it. And if you're comfortable with those, you can just practice this trick really slow at first. Practice the stepping off and the pulling the board up, flipping it, and then jumping back on it. I'm not sure how useful a trick like this is, but it definitely feels cool to flip the board and catch it again with your hand and then jump back on it. The next trick is probably the most normal one I'm going to do, the pop shove it. Although for our purposes, there might not be pop involved. For this trick, you use your feet to scoop the board around so it does a 180. I'm not going to go too far in depth into this one because I also have a how-to video for this, which I'll put a link to. But it's definitely an important foundational trick, which will open the door to a lot of new tricks after you learn it. So this trick is all in the back foot. More specifically, it's all in the back toes. You want to hang them off the tail side edge of your tail, and as you slightly press down with your back foot, you pull your toes back behind you in order to scoop the board around. Now the difference between a pop shove it and a shove it is obviously you pop the pop shove it. So if you want to learn a little easier version, then try it without popping and simply scooping your toes. And once you're comfortable with that, you can start to add in more downward motion to pop the tail and less of a scooping motion, and that's how you'll get some height on this trick. Like always, you can practice this trick while standing still or landing with one foot at first. Just remember that when you go to scoop the board, you want to put enough power in that the board rotates along the center axis of the board rather than along the pivot point of the truck. This is what's going to keep the board centered underneath you rather than going too far behind you. Next up, we have a pretty easy one with the Change Revert. Now the term revert might be a misnomer in this case because you usually revert the opposite direction you're spinning, but it just sounds better to me. This is another trick that's fun to throw when you're cruising really fast and you want to do a fun little stylish trick. You basically just want to hop up and do a 180 sex change and land slightly on the nose and continue on with a pivot. If you do this correctly, then you should end up with one fluid motion where your body does a 360 and your board does a 180. The important thing here is landing on the correct part of the nose so that it doesn't just go straight down and hit the ground. Practice your frontside body varials so you're comfortable with those, and also practice your fakie frontside pivots, and then you can try just linking them together into one continuous motion. You can practice this all while standing still and slowly doing one part and then the other, and then trying to put them together. Just really focus on where you're landing on the nose. You don't want to be too far up the nose and you don't want to be too far onto the board. It's kind of that sweet spot right in between. And for those of you who think that this isn't really much of a trick, if Joey Brzezinski can do it in Battle of the Barracks, then I think it's legitimate enough. For our next trick, we have the nose grab. Hopefully you should be able to tell what this trick is by the name of it. You basically just ollie and grab the nose of your board. Street grabs aren't that common anymore, but this one's easy enough to learn, so why not? All you really need to know for this trick is how to ollie. And the good thing about this one is because you're leaning forward and grabbing the nose, you don't even have to really be able to ollie high, because even if you have rocketed ollies, your nose is still going to come up either way, and all you have to do is lean down and grab it with your hand. So if you want to warm up for it, you can practice popping the board up into your hand and grabbing it by the nose a few times, and then you can start practicing while standing still. Just lean forward over the nose of your board with your hand kind of hanging down, ready to grab the nose when it comes up. And then when you pop, just grab the nose. Two things you'll probably notice about this trick is at first when you're trying it, you probably won't actually grab the board. You'll probably just put your hand under the nose like this. But as you get more comfortable, eventually, hopefully, you'll be able to get your thumb on top and actually grab the board. And the other thing is that, at least for me, I noticed that my back foot comes up off the tail really far because I'm leaning so far forward to grab the nose. You may or may not notice that you're doing this too, but either way, it doesn't really affect the trick, so it doesn't really matter. So just practice doing this trick little by little, pop some little ollies, start to try and slap the nose, and eventually start trying to grab the nose. And I would say lastly, it's more of a working on your ollie kind of thing, because the higher you get them, the better it's going to look. And for our last trick, we have the late frontside shove it. This one's for the people who think that some of these tricks are too easy. Hopefully this one will be a challenge for you. And while it may seem really hard at first, it's actually easier than you think. The only real thing that you need to know before this trick is ollies. Basically, all you have to do is ollie, and then when you're in the air, you kind of spaz out your feet and kick your back foot in front of you, and your front foot pulls back. The hardest thing about this trick is making sure you give the board enough time after you popped to raise up before you do the late shove it. Now you don't have to wait that long, but just make sure you're off the ground at least. For me, the foot positioning of this trick is what's really important. I like to have my back foot kind of in the heel side pocket and my front foot with my toes barely hanging off. This will make it so that after you're in the air, your feet will have some leverage in order to do the late shove it. Now I did do an entire how-to video on this trick as well, and I go pretty in-depth on how to do this one, so I'll just keep it brief. Put your feet in that foot positioning that I said, and then pop an ollie. As you start to raise up into the air, you use your heel of your back foot to push the tail forward in front of you, and you use your toes from your front foot to kind of pull the board back. These motions together should cause the board to turn frontside, and you just kind of have to hover above the board while it rotates. Just remember to wait that little half second after you pop the ollie, and then once you're in the air, you kick your feet pretty fast in order to get that frontside rotation. So that was my 10 easy tricks for intermediate skateboarders, part 2. Once again, I tried to get a good cross-section of easy and slightly harder tricks. And I'm curious to know which ones of these were your favorites and which ones you can already do. If you can't tell, I try and stray away from just the normal tricks in these videos, just to kind of give you a different perspective of what you can be learning. There are some normal ones like the pop shove it and Fakie Bigspin, but overall, I want to give you a variety of options and styles to fit your level and type of skateboarding. So thank you for watching once again, and keep on developing your skills, keep practicing, and you will keep learning. And besides all that, you can like and subscribe if you want.